first of our 3 fall talks that we have planned for the Los Ranchos Historical Society. So Fred Harvey in New Mexico, how did Marsha get interested in it? She said she began her love affair with all things Fred Harvey as a 10-year-old who came to New Mexico for summer camp. The campers were brought into Santa Fe for a day and got to roam the plaza free. Marsha and her friend went into the La Fonda Hotel, which we know is a Fred Harvey site, to take a look, and while there, they ran into Vivian Vance, who played Ethel Mertz on the most popular TV show, I Love Lucy. La Fonda made such an impression that Marsha returned to Santa Fe to go to St. John's College. And when she graduated, she had an emphasis and degree in anthropology, and she became interested in tourism and worked as the sales director for the La Fonda Hotel, and later became the Deputy Secretary of Tourism for New Mexico. She's been a realtor for 22 years in both Santa Fe and Albuquerque, and she has lived in Los Ranchos for the last 18 years. So, thank you, Marsha.
I have to, there was something even before seeing Ethel Mertz. It was this coffee pot that my father had a tendency when he'd stay at a hotel to take a souvenir, you know, the Holiday Inn towels and stuff. Well, this was from a Fred Harvey hotel. I don't know which one, but I used to put sand in it and water and play with it. So it's important to me, and then it wasn't until much later in life that I discovered it was Fred Harvey.
I love it.
Yeah. So, this is not a professional speech. This is my little work from what I did on my research. I did it for another group that I belong to, but I learned so much in doing it that it made it worthwhile. So, who the hell was Fred Harvey? He was an Englishman who came to the U.S. in the 1850s, and he built a career and family here. And then in his early 40s, started a revolutionary business practice. And he's known as the founding father of the American service industry. At the time when railroads were starting, there were no dining cars. So they had to stop every, I don't remember how many miles to get water and fuel or whatever they had to get. But, so that's why his story and his methods are still studied in graduate schools of tourism and hotel management. And his methods were very, very advanced for the time. In advertising and marketing, he's especially known for those buzzworthy words, branding and brand extension, because he was actually the first widely known and respected brand name in America, established before Coca-Cola. So, yeah, so he ran all the restaurants and hotels along the country's largest railroad, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, between Chicago and Los Angeles. And then he went on to serve the automobile traffic. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember, but I remember some places, so you'd be driving along and there was a rest stop and it was a Fred Harvey place. And then remember the airport, the old airport here, that was Fred Harvey, the Kachina room that was at the Albuquerque airport. Susan just so he even played a vital role in the newly developing airline business. His grandson, Freddie, was partners with Charles Lindbergh and Henry Ford, and they started TWA. Wow. And the interesting thing is they'd start a flight like in California, Southern California, and they'd fly like to Holbrook or to Winslow, And the old airfields are still there in Winslow. And
Because he
they're
had the
very-
restaurants there.
Yeah, so people would get off and go to the bathroom and eat and whatever, and then they'd fly here, either to Albuquerque or to Clovis. But, so anyway, they had a role in that too. He died like in the early, well, here's his picture. He died in 1901, and they did not publicize his death because they didn't want people to know that Fred Harvey wasn't still running these restaurants and hotels, but his family took up the slack on that and carried on. So that's a picture of him, and he was sickly in his later years, but very particular in what he did. So this slide is the Alvarado Indian Room, and I'm putting that up right now because Fred Harvey was also the most important driving force in the early appreciation of Native American art and culture. Most of the Indian art and crafts now on display in the world's major museums were originally owned by Fred Harvey, and much of the silver and turquoise jewelry that we think of as indigenous was commissioned, and in some cases even designed by the Fred Harvey Company to sell in its gift shops. He was the first company to embrace Native American and Spanish American imagery in architecture and design, and inventing what is now known as the Santa Fe style. So he started working at a restaurant in New York City called Smith and McNeil's when he arrived in America. He was a dishwasher. That restaurant had two dining rooms, a more casual one downstairs and then a more formal dining room upstairs. And that became the model for all of Fred Harvey's restaurants. He would have like a lunch counter and more formal dining room, and the passengers of the train would choose which one. I don't know how, and they supposedly telegraphed ahead their orders.
Wow.
And you all should go visit the Boleyn Harvey house because they'll tell you the stories too, but there was a certain way they placed a teaspoon or a teacup, and that indicated whether it was going to be coffee or tea or whatever, but they had it down to a science on how it was gonna happen. So Fred started working for railroads in his early days selling tickets, and that was in Leavenworth, Kansas. He had made a stop in New Orleans because of the culinary treats that were there, but he left New Orleans because he hated the slavery and said, I'm out of here. But I think it did influence his menus in many ways. So he explored the food service and went to one railroad, and they said, oh no, we don't want to do that. And they said, go talk to the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. And that was a new upstart railroad. And they were the ones who were successful in gaining the passage over the Raton Pass. There were 3 railroads vying for that, and the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe was the one who actually got it. So, let's see, I've got this slide. I think it's kind of blurry, but these red dots are where there was either a restaurant. Red circles indicate Santa Fe hotels and dining stations that were under the management of Fred Harvey.
That's a lot.
Isn't that incredible?
Wow.
And you know, he wanted to go all the way to Mexico too, and he went down to Vaughn, New Mexico, or Demick, New Mexico. Yeah. He had one in Vaughn also, but I wondered why Boleyn was there, you know, because the Santa Fe goes from here to LA, it follows I-40 pretty much, so. But you can see all of those. I mean, he had a huge business empire. Yeah. So the goal was to connect Las Vegas, Albuquerque, and south to Mexico from Kansas. They also had plans to expand to the West Coast. And he was asked to establish a temporary restaurant in Las Vegas, New Mexico, before the railroad had even bought or even built a proper depot. So they worked out of old Santa Fe boxcars parked on a sidetrack. One veteran railroader remembered them as the worst looking boxcars that the company could scare up. But when travelers entered the big side door, they gasped with wonderment at what met their gaze. The walls were shiny with fresh paint, the tables were spread with heavy milk-white Irish linen and napkins. The silverware shone like a French plate mirror. The clean, clear glass goblets were filled with ice and nice clear water, and on the tables were large vases filled with wonderful fresh flowers. And those were in boxcars, so.
Wow.
But Fred Harvey and the railroad had bigger plans for Las Vegas, New Mexico than the retrofitted boxcars. They wanted to cash in on a growing trend in the hotel business, which was health tourism. So 6 miles north of Las Vegas in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, there were naturally occurring hot springs, and they had been believed to be curative. So the railroad bought the hot springs and all the land and buildings around them for $102,000. The railroad took over the small hotel and also took to planning a massive new facility. I'm going to read you this quote. It says, "On that spring night in 1882, the drunken cowboys riding through northern New Mexico could have been forgiven for squinting in disbelief at the sight of the Montezuma Hotel. It did appear to be a hallucination. The Montezuma was one of the most astonishing architectural creations in America. It was nestled in a gorgeous middle of nowhere, 6 miles outside of Las Vegas, and the old Santa Fe Trail town that the railroad had only recently connected to civilization. It was the largest wood frame building in the U.S., some 90,000 square feet, with 270 guest rooms. The Queen Anne style. It featured a dining room that seated 500, a casino, a breathtaking wine cellar, 11 bowling alleys, a billiard hall, and an immense therapeutic bathing facility offering 6 different kinds of baths, so patrons could fully experience the medicinal powers of the hot springs. The service at the Montezuma was brilliant, with staff imported from the best hotels in New York, London, Chicago, and St. Louis. The cuisine was amazingly ambitious. The food combined the expertise of classically trained chefs from the restaurant capitals of the world with fresh regional American ingredients, as well as delicacies like green turtles and sea celery harvested by pearl diving Yaqui tribesmen, to which other kitchens in the country had no access. I still don't think they have any access to it. And you know, most chefs wouldn't appreciate that for almost another century. So in only a few weeks, the resort was already attracting dukes and princesses and presidents who quickly booked passage on the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe to go to this fabulous hotel. 2 years later, unfortunately, it burned down because it was wood. Yeah, a bad scene there. But they rebuilt it. They rebuilt it, and we'll get into that later on. So this is the Hotel Castaneda in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And it was built at the same time. And this was trackside, and it had an eating house, a depot, and a hotel. The railroad, let's see, okay. The railroad was not going, they wanted Fred to open 3 more eating houses in New Mexico. Ironically, there was not going to be a Santa Fe eating house in Santa Fe. for reasons that were never entirely clear. They said some combination of terrain and the local politics being too challenging, which we can all appreciate.
Hasn't changed.
Yes, the city different. So the railroad bypassed the capital of New Mexico. Instead, it ran its tracks 20 miles south, from 20 miles south at Lamy into Santa Fe. And they built a branch line connecting that. So that was the railroad's 20-year mission to replace the old Santa Fe Trail. So the railroad now covered what used to only be on horseback or wagon trains. So he opened a small eating house in the Lamy Depot and a hotel in Raton, the Mountain House. He also set up operations in the dusty New Depot in Deming, a tiny town just 30 miles from Mexico. But the Castaneda is so beautiful, and it's reopened now, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But you can have lunch there, you can stay there, you can have dinner, they have a bar, and it's just to see the trains come and go. So it was really the first railroad hotel in New Mexico. The last was La Posada, that Mary Coulter did, and we'll get into that later. I'm jumping ahead. Okay, so this is the Raton Railroad Depot in Raton. And so at the time they opened the Castaneda, there was trouble in this eating house in Raton. A fight broke out among the all-male black serving staff. Fred was immediately concerned and took a train to Raton to try to solve the problem. He brought along a childhood friend of his and asked him to help manage the Raton restaurant. His friend suggested that they fire the all-male staff and hire women, but not local women. He wanted to import young, single, white women from Kansas. He thought that they would be easier to manage and less likely to get liquored up and have on chairs. It was a radical idea. So here are those ladies. And it changed the workforce for America to have all of these women now working. And these were respectable jobs. And, parents had to let their daughters go, and the Harvey girls had to sign a contract for a 6-month period. And Fred Harvey also built dormitories in these hotels for the ladies to stay. They had a house mother, they had to be in by 11, they weren't supposed to date, all these rules. So according to the old joke, there were no ladies west of Dodge City and no women west of Albuquerque. So his friend thought having these Harvey girls there would be a calming effect on working there, and the customers as well. The women could help alleviate racial tensions and maybe even make the cowboys a little more gentlemanly. The race thing, that was interesting to me, that that was an issue back at the turn of the century. I guess it was, but anyway, I was surprised to see that. I told you about all that. The Harvey girls who were required to wear a uniform, a plain black, long sleeve, floor length, woolen dress. That's kind of like this. It's not wool. Let's see, with a just short of a clerical Elsie collar, along with black shoes and stockings. And to complete the outfit, she would wear a starched white apron from neck to ankle, which had to be changed immediately whenever the slightest spot showed. Her hair was to be kept plain and simple, preferably tied back with a single white ribbon. Makeup was forbidden. If she made it through her 6 months, she would receive a vacation with free train travel anywhere on the Santa Fe,
Wow.
after which she could be invited to return for another 6-month tour of duty. Thus the beginning of the Harvey Girls. And I have a book up here on the Harvey Girls, and if you haven't read it, it's really, really interesting and good. And have you all watched the Judy Garland movie, The Harvey Girls? That's fun. It's, you know, it just, the life then was so different 100 years ago. So as the railroad developed in New Mexico, the terrain and diverse culture provided the perfect setting to expand the Harvey House experience and establish luxury hotels with tourist attractions. These hotels became favorite stops for train passengers headed to the West Coast and served as a home base for vacationers who enjoyed the first-rate accommodations while exploring the surrounding environment. The luxurious destination Harvey hotels had it all: interesting architecture, colorful design, the allure of native artists, delicious, freshly prepared food, and outstanding service, all presented in the well-known Fred Harvey way. So we're gonna, oh wait. Okay, that's a mock-up of a lunchroom. This is in the Berlin Harvey House Hotel. And recently, they just did some videos of, they reenacted, they hired local people to dress up as Harvey Girls, and they did some filming, and they had all of the china out and stuff. I didn't put those in here, I didn't have time, but you might Google that and see what you can find, because they did a great job. And I think the Berlin Harvey House has really gone above and beyond. They now have a restaurant there called the Whistle Stop, and you can go down there for lunch. They have homemade food, and you can tour the dorms where the Harvey Girls live. The depot is there with the dining room and the lunch counter, the reading room. You know, people would get off the train, they'd go buy a magazine or a newspaper or cigars or whatever they bought, but that was an important thing. And they called them reading rooms. It was kind of a lobby more than anything. So, let's see. So, back to the Castaneda. So I'm gonna talk about all the hotels in New Mexico, kind of in their chronological order. The Castaneda, it was completed in 1899, Mission Revival style. It was open to the tracks, large dining room, seated 108, and the lunchroom over 50 people. There were 37 guest rooms on the second floor, which were reached by a sweeping staircase. In June of 1899, the Castaneda was the headquarters of the first Rough Riders reunion with Teddy Roosevelt. So that really brought a lot of attention to New Mexico and to the hotels. Teddy Roosevelt, many of the Rough Riders stayed at the Castaneda. It stayed in business until 1948, and then it just kind of was sitting there for a long time, went into disrepair, and it is now back in business, renovated by a gentleman named Alan Alfeld, and he also owned the La Posada in Winslow, Arizona.
That's the one.
Yeah, Alan Alfeld. And he really restored as best to his being, you know, trying to get all the furniture, all the things that were important back to the hotel. So it's got 20 rooms now, and he bought it about, it was 7 years ago, and he's been working to bring it back to its glory. But it, you know, I think that would be a fun train ride from here to get on Amtrak and go up there and spend the night and then come back. That would be,
That'd be fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
bought the Plaza Hotel also.
Yes, he did, and that's another
Oh, I
cool
didn't
place.
know that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the legal tender in Lamy he just bought, yes. So he's a good guy. He's, you know, and keeping
Must
these.
have a lot of money.
And good, I mean, there's money, I think, out there for restoration of these historical sites. I know he gets a lot of grants too, but, you know, we'll get to the one in Clovis in a minute and I'll talk to you about it. Okay, this is the El Ortiz. This one was a really different hotel because it was built around a courtyard, which looks so charming. It's been torn down, I can't believe it. But I think one of those buildings, I think maybe this building is still there, and it's been turned into a house that I toured a couple of years ago. So it was built in 1910, and it replaced a Fred Harvey lunchroom that had opened in 1883. The small hotel was built in the Pueblo Revival style, designed by renowned architect Lewis Curtis, with interior designs by Mary Coulter. And it could seat 34 at the lunch counter and 12 in the dining room. It was a small hotel, especially by Harvey standards. But it looks so charming. So this one is the Gran Quivera, and this is in Clovis, New Mexico. The guy who does my hair is from Clovis, and I said, have you ever seen this hotel? And he said, no. You know, so it's still there, and it's looking for someone who's got the energy to save it. And they're trying to appeal to the city of Clovis to get someone interested in it, because it's just such a shame to have it torn down like our hotel. Yeah. So this one was built in 1900. It was also a fine example of Mission Revival style with an elegant arcade trackside. The once Grand Hotel with its grand name is now owned by the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway and is in a sad state of disrepair. The hotel closed in 1940. When I was a little girl, we lived in Dallas, and my father owned a business in Clovis, and we'd take the train from Dallas to Clovis. Unfortunately, we didn't stay there. I guess if it closed in 1940, I was born after that. a little, not much, but we stayed in the Hotel Clovis, which was downtown. And I don't know if any of you all remember as young children going, and you'd sit at a counter, you know, they had lunch counters, but then they did have a dining.
Spin around.
Yeah, I mean, I remember it pretty well. But that, if anyone knows anyone who's into restoration, we should tell them to save it, because, you know, the railroad doesn't want to keep these buildings up. They want them gone.
They don't care.
Yeah. And here we are.
Oh, that was majestic.
Our Alvarado. I don't remember ever seeing it. I just remember it being torn down. Horrible. So it was one of the most famous and near and dear to all of our hearts. This was perhaps the most celebrated opening of a Harvey house in New Mexico. And it was built for $200,000 in 1902, which was a year after Fred Harvey's death. The hotel and surrounding buildings were known as the Gray Lady along the tracks at First Street. The California Mission style of architecture featured towers, balconies, and arcades, supported by dramatic turquoise-rimmed arches. We replaced a simple Harvey house that had opened in 1883. The hotel complex included the popular Indian Building, along with the Santa Fe Depot, and stretched 700 feet north and south along the railroad tracks. And this was the first project with a Fred Harvey company for Mary Coulter. She was that designer and architect from, I believe she was from Chicago. And her style has really been what's preserved and made the Santa Fe style what it is. Mary Coulter's legendary imprint on the Indian building in particular provided the perfect setting for the museum and sales rooms. So in the basement of the El Dorado, they had rooms that a salesman would come rent for a day or 2 days, and he would meet with clients to buy their goods, whatever they were. I thought that was an interesting concept. I'd never heard of
Like an
anything.
office away from home.
Yeah, you know, so, anyway. The Alvarado closed in 1969 and the building was demolished in 1970s.
Thank you, Harry Kinney.
After local residents were unable to raise the 1.5 million, you know, wasn't, yeah. So it served train passengers and Albuquerque residents for over 60 years, and it was a popular destination or stopover for many celebrities for several decades, until the rich and famous began to travel by airplane. Okay. There's a picture of the formal dining room there. You can see how big it was. So now we're over in Gallup. The Santa Fe Railroad built the El Navajo Hotel in 1923, replacing an early Harvey house that had opened in 1895. This was designed by Mary Coulter, and the architecture of this new structure was a departure from the Spanish-influenced design of other Harvey hotels. And it was supposed to be a tribute to the Navajo natives. Rare Indian sand paintings were focal points in the public areas, and Navajo rugs warmed the red tile floors. This was Coulter's last project. The former El Navajo structure now houses the Gallup Cultural Center with a visitor center, museum, and art gallery, as well as an Amtrak station. We traveled by car a lot going over to Arizona, and I'm always like peering over to see if I can see it, and you can, and I'm gonna stop there one time, yeah. Yeah, so let's go, but it is different, you can see kind of, it's almost a Pueblo deco style, closed in 1957. Okay, here's the Belen Harvey house. They used the Mission Revival style, and it was built in 1907, and it cost $25,000 to build. Some records indicate that trains with passengers did not run through Belen until 1910. On the ground floor of this Harvey house, 45 hijacked stools surrounded the lunchroom counter, and the dining room comfortably served 64. And the newsstand was brimming with newspapers, cigars, and popular Fred Harvey picture postcards. And the rooms on the second floor were the home to the Harvey girls and the Harvey house manager and family. I really urge you all to go down and look at it, because you get the true picture of what it was like then. So, I told you it has a restaurant there, so you can make a lunch stop. They do homemade desserts too that are really, really good. Okay, finally, last but not least is La Fonda and Santa Fe. And this was a real departure. They had just, Fred Harvey Company had built the El Tovar in the Grand Canyon. And I'm not covering Arizona on this lecture, but we're stopping in Gallup, but I wanted to end with La Fonda. They made it really into the crown jewel, other than El Tovar. So by the time, it says, by the time Fred Harvey had built the highly successful El Tovar in Grand Canyon, Fred's grandson, Freddie, needed a project. He's the same one who did the airlines. The Harvey family had long had Santa Fe in its sights as they had vacationed there. So he was given the task of going to Santa Fe to find a hotel to buy. The word La Fonda means the inn, and there had been several hotels on that site when Freddie got there. The hotel was quickly overhauled to make it's sufficiently Harvey worthy for the 1926 tourist season. New staff was brought in from other Harvey locations. Dining rooms got new linen, silverware, and stemware. Every surface was repainted. The only thing they kept was the name La Fonda. So, in addition to taking over the hotel, Fred Harvey ordered a large fleet of cars and buses that were so lavishly appointed that they were referred to as Pullmans on wheels. And they also arranged to buy out one of Santa Fe's leading tour operators, Erna Ferguson, the energetic. You might have known. Yes. Story.
So was that a remodeled hotel? That was already
Yes.
existing?
Yeah.
remodeled?
Yeah, and in this
Do you know-
book,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, in this book you can see, it was called the Exchange Hotel, and then it went through several iterations, and,
Yeah, your
Uh-huh.
pictures looked as they added
Yeah.
things and
yeah,
they changed
so
the name.
this is along, what's the street, St. Francis?
That goes toward
Yeah, what am I
the church is right here.
Yeah, the church is here, yeah, so
The
they're
shed
coming
is
down, San Francisco, this is what it's
You're
called.
going north, I don't know.
My
the
little
streets.
memory, yeah. Anyway, it's right in front of the La Fonda. And it's interesting to look at this picture because there was a little courtyard to go into La Fonda. That's not that way anymore. You just go in,
Used to go
the
down
main door.
further down there.
But it's fun seeing all
And
those.
then that became the breakfast room.
Yeah,
in that-
well, the French pastry shop was,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, I used to go there with my dad too.
Mhm.
And, yeah, it was, I've got a bunch of Fred Harvey furniture too. I've got headboards from La Fonda. I've got a piano that was at La Fonda. What else do I have?
How is Erna Ferguson tied into that?
Okay, I'm gonna get to her. So, thank you, Ron, for getting me back on track. Okay. Besides her passion and knowledge, Ferguson was the only all-female tour guide staff in town. Again, it's females. They became the prototypes of a new kind of Harvey girl, the Indian Detour Couriers. They were called the Couriers. And they were expected to be much better educated and more refined than Harvey girls. Bright, attractive college students, preferably bilingual in Spanish and at least one other language. The Indian Detours became so popular so quickly that La Fonda's 55 rooms were not sufficient. Anyway, La Fonda is now like 220 something rooms. I'll go to that. So that became what is known as Indian Detours. And you can see the bus and the Pullman cars. And so people would sign up. You'd get off the train in Lamy and come in to La Fonda, and you'd stay there. And one day you'd go up to Pouillet Cliffs or up to Taos or whatever, I think that's at Pouillet. Or
Frijoles?
yeah, maybe Bandelier, yeah. But, so the couriers would go along and, give detailed descriptions. The gentlemen who drove the car, they were called dudes. And the dudes wore khaki pants, a white shirt, and a hat, and a kerchief around their neck. Yeah, so.
I've seen those things
Yes.
in the old National
Yes.
Geographic.
I don't know, did I have one back there? I don't know. I don't know if I did or not, but, yeah, the couriers wore, a khaki skirt and a velveteen blouse that came down to about here, V-neck, and they had lots of jewelry on, and they wore the little cloche hats then, and very, they were supposed to dress like Gordine. I could have worked there. Yeah. So, it was, I mean, tourism started that way in New Mexico. And Fred Harvey brought so much here as far as jobs for women, getting women into the workforce, appreciation for indigenous cultures and arts, tourism. You know, these are all things that are so important to New Mexico today, and he really was way ahead of his time in doing that. And this is La Fonda now, and you can kind of see the difference in that. So it has 180 rooms now. Still the most important meeting spot in Santa Fe. And it underwent a renovation a few years ago, and that's how I got, since I had worked there, I was friends and family, and they let me come up and buy furniture that they were selling first. They let people, their friends and family do that. I've got this really big, like tabletta, like Indian tabletta that's, you know, this wide. There was a guy there, and when I worked there, his name was Ernesto, he painted everything in that hotel. Down in the basement, he painted every headboard. My headboards say room 208 on the back of them. And, you know, he was just a fixture there, all those painted glass windows around La Plazuela. Yeah. Yeah, Ernesto. So that's the end of my little talk. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Can we, when Sue gives her talk in November, can we see the headboard?
Yes, you can
We want to see the headboard and all.
Yeah, because it'll be at Marsha's,
Yeah.
Marsha's Matt Kaplan house.
Yeah.
Do you recognize the, old glass, like the plates and the patterns at all?
I don't personally. I'm sure there are many books about that, but each hotel had their own kind of set. This Membre's design
I
was,
see that.
yeah, this was, so every year in October, at the end of October, there's a Fred Harvey conference in Santa Fe, and I would encourage any of you to go. It's really fun. We call ourselves the Fred Heads. And it's, you know, 2 days of lectures and slides, and Fred Harvey's family is there, and they do the foodie dinner, which is where I got this favor. And it's from menus of his, and it's really, you know, cool appetite, a very kind of formally done thing, and they auction things off too, Fred Harvey memorabilia, but it's fun. You can also watch it online too. I did that 1 year.
When is it gonna be held, do you know?
If I looked at a calendar, it's like around October 26th.
New Mexico magazine, it gives it, I think, is it the 25th?
Yeah,
Through
like
the
20.
27th, because they did a piece on it.
Okay.
These two ladies
Yes.
are Harvey girls, and I have a picture of me with them last year.
You should
They're
pass
twins.
that- You should pass that
They're
around too in your
twins.
fiesta.
Yeah, they're twins, and they are lovely, lovely ladies. When I worked at La Fonda, there were several others that were Harvey girls, and, you know, they departed from the Harvey girl uniform. They wore fiesta skirts and colorful blouses, you know, because they really wanted that to be the Santa Fe. Yes, Jim?
You mentioned something that was funny. You said that they would qualify for a vacation or a trip on the railroad if they lasted the 6 months.
Yes.
What were the things that precluded them from staying for the 6 months? Were they getting married? Were they?
No, he wouldn't let them get married. They couldn't get married.
That was their contract?
Yes, that was
So
it.
what?
So
anything
probably
funny, crazy, or
homesick,
scandalous?
probably homesickness or sneaking out. And there's a book that I'll tell you the name of too that talked about that period. It's a fictional book about a train wreck that happened at the Montezuma. And it's really quite good. I think it's, I don't know. I'll look and tell you that. But, yeah, you know, I would think they'd get homesick. A lot of them would,
Yeah, I've
like,
never been away from the farm.
I remember going to camp and being homesick, and, you know, it was,
Where'd you go to camp?
Camp Davis, which was in Rosiata, New Mexico, which is outside of Las Vegas. Yeah, here.
Oh, you
Yeah,
got that
so Jane
background.
first. There you are. Yeah, that's me. Well, you saw that. This is the
I
Harvey
did it.
girls and me last year.
I love that.
Cool.
Yeah, it
Okay, you
was.
gotta hand it to me so I can put it on
Yeah,
There they
Marsha,
are.
can we put that on the website?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's really wonderful.
My aunt Emily was an Harvey girl.
Oh,
Yes.
Oh.
And she met her husband there and he was a chef.
Uh-huh.
With the
my
big,
gosh.
tall, flat hats.
You know, so many of the Harvey girls married railroad people
uh-huh.
and populated the West.
Mhm.
So that was a good thing. I'll tell you that book's name if
Yeah.
anyone
I
cares.
used to meet one of the salesmen that came through
Yeah,
on a
Yeah.
trip and,
yeah.
oh, I'll see you in 3 weeks, you know, when I come back through the other way.
It's
We'll
called
have dinner.
The Night Journal,
The Night Journal.
by Elizabeth Crook. Crook, C-R-O-O-K.
There's
I've
one
got it.
book that I'd like to mention, Erna Ferguson, she wrote a book, Albuquerque,
Mhm.
illustrations by Lee Brown. And, that's her book on Albuquerque is a pretty good description of Albuquerque.
I'd like to read that.
Yeah, and the third chapter in there, is a description of who we really were, the Chavezes. It was amazing to find that one chapter throughout all the reading that I've done. She had it down almost pat, but if you read that chapter, you'll get a clearer picture as to what Albuquerque was pre-America.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to read it.
Just
I will. Is
Cool.
it published or is it?
Yes,
in
it's
the
published.
what
Yeah,
is
you
it
can
called?
find it
What's it
on
called
World
again?
Cat.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It's, did you say it's called the Albuquerque? What was-
It's Albuquerque, illustrations by Lee Brown, by her. And the third chapter in that describes the Grand Hacienda on Chavez and Rio Grande, and the church.
Oh.
And
I'd
the
like to
wealth that was involved before the United States. It's cool. But she doesn't mention the Chavezes by name, but she mentions how this thing was set up in that one chapter. I don't know how she got it.
Yeah,
A cardinal or somebody told her, I don't know where she had
well,
got that. It surprised me.
I mean, we have so much great history here.
Yeah.
It's just, it's amazing, but, you know, it all kind of culminates for me and being a little girl and having those experiences. This book, my kids gave me last year for Christmas.
Awesome.
You should take a look at this because it's before and after pictures of La Fonda and it's just, it's stunning. I don't know if they sell this anyplace else,
They
if it's
do,
published.
it's uber expensive,
You can buy it at La Fonda and, they've reopened a Detour store there. I had this wild idea of restarting Detours and giving tours to people, you know, which would be,
There you go.
yeah.
And dress the way women dress.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that'd be
yeah,
great.
yeah, it would
With all
have,
the Airbnbs and the
yeah,
bed and breakfasts
yeah,
around.
no,
you
I
know that
think,
you can-
yeah. Susan,
We're doing this.
you could be a courier.
Yeah.
You guys could be dudes.
We can be dudes.
We need good cars though, we need, those touring things look so, they had like swivel chairs in them, you know, it was lap of luxury.
Well,
Anyway,
we'll do a little side business.
Yes,
Couriers and do other
Yeah.
things, I love this.
yeah, and then this, guy, this is a relatively new book, the New Mexico Historical Society, some of you all went to. He was there and he spoke, he did a book on the detours, so it's relatively new, but very interesting, so.
Somebody recently came up with a bunch of old photos that nobody had ever seen. Did you see that in the news?
From-
Railroad photos?
No,
No, it was in the news recently.
Yeah.
Some woman found this vast collection of photos.
nice,
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
ta-da.
they are.